Hello, welcome to MJRRPG, a podcast for tabletop role-playing game reviews, replays, and maybe other things. This is a review for the Japanese Call of Cthulhu scenario, Kamigami wa Denshi Doragu no Yume o Miru ka, or The God's Dream of Digital Drugs, written by Byoushin, of the INT no Gisei Shataku, or Victims of INT group. It is the first scenario in the Japonism pack of 3 tech-focused scenarios set in modern or near-future Japan. You can read the text version of this review over on mjrrpg.com, and as always, a narrative replay of my run of this scenario should come out next week. Do note that this scenario currently does not have an English version and is only available in Japanese at the moment. The first part of this review is safe for players with minimal spoilers, and I'll preface the second spoiler-filled section so that aspiring players can flee. In short, The God's Dream of Digital Drugs is an investigation-heavy scenario that involves networking your way through modern-day Tokyo to solve a mythos-tinged musical techno-thriller mystery. If your group is looking for a 1 or 2 session game full of social interaction, musical references, and lots of transit around Japan's capital, I fully recommend this unique and memorable scenario, as long as the keeper is ready for some pre-game preparation, and possibly translation work. Digital Drugs is a very unique little scenario, quite different from any others I've run so far, though I won't get into any specifics until the later spoiler-full section. It is very much a social investigation-focused and free-form scenario. There is a set and clear time limit, but the players are given free roam of Tokyo to poke around and tug on strings up until the endgame. With some extra game time and preparation on the keeper's part, though there already is a good bit of extra work they'll need to do, it would be fun to emphasize the sense of place with some location pictures or train routes. The text suggests a 3-hour playtime, but my run took close to 4 hours, going pretty quick with plenty of time skips, but also with a substantial extra subplot added in. If I ran the game again, I'd do it without adding extra meat to keep the time down, but with more emphasis on pictures and sensory details. There are no pre-generated investigators available, but the scenario does have suggestions for what skills will be useful for investigators. For my group of 4 players, I prepared 6 characters, each with skills that would come in use, as well as having possible connections to locations, people, or events in the scenario. The party ended up being a programmer, a pianist, an office worker, and a police officer, with the unused characters being a doctor and a graduate student, with an occult specialty, of course. If you don't feel like making investigators, see the show notes for a Google Drive link to the investigators I prepared. Digital Drugs was overall a very neat little scenario, and if your group is wanting something different from the usual 1920s American Call of Cthulhu, modern-day Tokyo is certainly different, and the pace and themes of the scenario are also unique. I very much enjoyed it, and would like to give it another go someday. As long as you are looking for a social interaction-heavy game, I fully recommend it, assuming someone in your group can translate it, as Google Translate alone butchers it beyond recognition. You can purchase the Japonism scenario pack on Booth.pm. Digital-only international purchases through PayPal worked fine for me. Visa or MasterCard is also available, but it didn't like my Visa. If you're in Japan, Rakuten, ATM, net banking, or convenience store payments are also available. From here on out, there be spoilers. If you're a player wanting to join in on this game sometime, I would suggest stopping here. Keepers do listen in. The basic structure of the scenario is fairly simple and traditional Call of Cthulhu. The investigators meet with an NPC acquaintance. The NPC leaves a few hints, then promptly dies, leaving the investigators a day to find out what caused the death, then head into a final event to work out a plan to stop the thing from happening again on a wider scale. On paper, fairly straightforward, and follows the general structure of many Cthulhu scenarios, good or bad. But the details and playstyle of Digital Drugs really set it apart, and not just its modern-day Tokyo setting. The NPC is killed by a rogue music-writing AI's song that accidentally created a melody mimicking Trunimbra, driving those that listen to it insane and suicidal. The NPC also invited the investigators to a music festival in 2 days' time, clearly setting up a time limit, even if the players don't know exactly why yet. Following a digital paper trail, the investigators bounce between companies, university labs, and a music-worshipping new religion church in Tokyo, finding out who was involved in creating the AI, learning that the song will be played and broadcast live over the internet at the festival, and hopefully how to stop it. Besides featuring Trunimbra, a rare feature in Call of Cthulhu scenarios, what really stands out in Digital Drugs is that there are no antagonists. There's absolutely no one out to deliberately subvert the investigators, much less do them any harm. If the players go against all their natural urges and suspicions, and are just honest with every NPC, they can learn everything they need to know, and any NPC that is able will volunteer their help in stopping the threat. The new religion cult itself isn't to blame for the mythos god coming to ruin everyone's day, as even they tried to stop the Trunembra song before the start of the game. And really, Trunembra itself isn't involved unless the players bring it in, and even then it's an attempt to stop the AI song. And the song itself was created entirely by happenstance. No one is really trying to cover it up, and when revealed everyone will try to help out. It's a rare game when most NPCs are helpful, much less when the cultists themselves are good guys. Players being players, they'll almost certainly be suspicious of everyone they meet, becoming their own worst enemies. The more they suspect the NPCs of being hostile, the more they'll lie, making themselves look ever more suspicious in the eyes of the NPCs. Pretty neat. Digital drugs requires a non-negligible amount of prep work, not counting translating if needed. NPC details vary from some basic descriptions and stat blocks to nothing at all. Right from the get-go, the onboarding is completely up to the keeper. The investigators go to meet with a friend. Who the investigators are, how they know each other, how they know the friend, where and why they go to meet them, all are left up to the keeper to prepare. In my run, I had the player characters all be friends, drawn together by the doomed NPC, who I made an electronic music producer. He invites them all to a small gig. I made it a electro-punk jazz band just to be excessively niche, where he invites and gives them tickets to the upcoming Roppongi Hills Music Festival, while making vague hints that it'll be a show they never forget, and not really answering their questions. All the while he's listening to an earbud, then he kills himself with a pen. The scenario text afterwards is fairly detailed, giving 5 locations to investigate before the music festival. Not all of them are strictly necessary to go to in order to stop the song from playing at the festival. In particular, the venture fund group Penture Co. doesn't really lead to much, but going to every location does let the players piece together the full picture of what happened before the scenario starts. Going into the festival, the party may have the full support of every NPC they come across beforehand, giving them easy access to sound equipment and plenty of help disabling the AI music. Easy. Assuming your players didn't spook everyone they talked to, or didn't accidentally listen to the song ahead of time and lose an investigator or two by accident. Or they didn't figure out where and how to stop the song, or didn't even show up at the festival. In general, the odds are pretty heavily in the player's favor, but if they slip up, the consequences are dire, with the suicide-inducing song being unleashed not only on the live audience, not only on the Japanese TV audience, but on anyone watching the streaming broadcast online, and anyone who hears the recording in the future. That, by the way, would be a very cool follow-up scenario, hunting down internet terrorists spreading a ring-like suicide song. While I really like the non-violent, non-confrontational aspect of the scenario, when I ran it, I added a little bit of antagonism. It wasn't at all required, and flies in the face of what the scenario is likely trying to do, but I felt like the group was expecting it to an extent, and might have been a little let down had it not been present. For our run, I found it worked out well and added a bit of extra excitement. What I did was have the music cult, the Church of Serialism, splinter, with one group wanting to stop the song as per the scenario text, but a small splinter group latching onto the song, believing that the song would truly bring the god of music to Earth. The main bulk of the church is arrested prior to the start of the game, and I had the splinter group be partly responsible for that. I also had the doomed friend NPC be a member of the splinter group. They aren't present for most of the scenario, only coming up in an email, and later, thanks to one NPC being a police officer, a short interrogation of a church member. In the final scene, my group did not have all the NPCs on their side, having kept the secret of what the song really was to themselves, and so had to disable the sound equipment on their own. As the programmer investigator tried to shut down the sound equipment, a number of splinter cultists in the crowd noticed something was happening and started to close in. The office worker investigator distracted them by whipping the crowd up into a frenzy. A cultist eventually slipped through, and as he closed in on the programmer racing to finish his work, the police officer investigator bashed him over the head with his bokuto. This was the only person-on-person violence in our whole run. Just in time, the programmer shut off the music, and to fill the dead air, our pianist investigator improvised the show of their life. I really liked how our ending turned out, though I also really would have loved to see one of the other endings play out, where the investigators perform a counter song they found in the church, which summons the actual Trunembra, overwhelming the AI song and saving the audience from killing themselves, but also shattering every piece of glass in earshot, and causing anyone and everyone watching the broadcast to hear and witness a mythos deity, causing widespread insanity across Tokyo, Japan, and the wider world. Also very cool. Do Gods Dream of Digital Drugs is overall a great social investigation-heavy scenario, and its focus on music and a lack of antagonism also makes it stand out. If desired, it could fairly easily be transplanted out of Japan to any other modern or future setting. It does require a bit of extra work from the keeper to get moving, but nothing that would take more than half an hour or so of thinking up an introduction. Once again, you can pick up Digital Drugs in the Japonism pack on Booth.pm. Link in the show notes. Thank you for listening. If you want to hear the full story of my run of the game, I'll soon have a narrative replay episode of this scenario up, as well as a written version if my voice upsets you. And as always, thank you to CryoChamber for the use of their albums Cthulhu and Nyarlathotep. Check the show notes for links to their YouTube and Bandcamp. I do hope you come back next time for more reviews and replays. Have a good one.